The demolition work started yesterday. My younger sister, Olivia, said it lightly, as if it were nothing more than casual small talk. Her voice rode on the gentle morning sea breeze and reached my ears, sounding so unreal that I could hardly believe it was happening. I was standing in front of the house, on the hill overlooking the ocean, the home my grandfather had left behind. Yet what spread out before my eyes was a bizarre sight. A massive yellow bulldozer roaring as it tore into the ground, while workers rushed back and forth in restless motion. My father, Michael Bennett, and my mother, Eleanor, gazed at the scene with clear satisfaction. In my mother's hand was a champagne glass, and beside her stood a brand new sign proudly engraved in gold letters with the words Harborside Resort. As if they were celebrating the opening of a grand show that was about to begin, uncontrollable excitement was written all over their faces. "Emily, you finally made it. You're late." My mother noticed me and spoke in a mildly reproachful tone. However, there was not a trace of concern in her eyes. All that was there was absolute confidence that everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. My father stood with his arms crossed, surveying the entire site like a king gazing out over his own kingdom. "Look at this, Emily. The time has finally come for this land to show its true value. It's going to become a first-class resort worthy of the Bennett family name." To them, I had always been nothing more than a part-time environmental researcher. Even after graduating from college, I never settled into a stable job, instead spending my time on things they could not understand, like nature conservation and wildlife surveys, making me, in their eyes, a pitiful daughter. They genuinely believed that the only reason I was allowed to live in this house was out of sheer family charity. From the bottom of their hearts, they looked down on me, convinced that I posed no obstacle whatsoever to their plans. Olivia approached me, using exaggerated gestures as if she were a stage actress performing a role. On her finger, an absurdly large diamond ring sparkled brightly. "Hey, are you even listening? The opening event for this resort is going to be my wedding. Can you imagine it? An infinity pool overlooking the ocean, hundreds of guests, and fireworks lighting up the night sky. Don't you think it's perfect?" Her words drifted around me like a fairy tale completely detached from reality. My father smoothly picked up where she left off. "Olivia's wedding is only the beginning. After that, we'll offer corporate executive retreats and members-only wedding plans targeting wealthy clients from overseas. Several investors have already poured significant funds into this Harborside Resort project. They highly value the Bennett family's business sense." My mother wore an enraptured expression, as if she were already envisioning future buildings in the empty space before her. "For the interiors, we'll import the finest marble from Italy. The chef will be recruited from a 3-Michelin-star restaurant in France. This isn't just a resort, it's a status symbol." In their minds, the grand plan already seemed perfectly complete. Within that plan, there was no place for me, nor for the true meaning of this house and the land it stood on. Olivia looked down at me with a condescending gaze and then gave me a smile filled with false sympathy. "I even found an apartment in the city for you. It's just a studio, but it seems to get plenty of sunlight. Dad said he'd cover the rent for the first few months." And then she added the decisive final remark. "Obviously you can't pay for it yourself, right? You don't have any savings." Those words should have pierced my heart like a sharp knife, but to me, they sounded no different from the distant cries of seagulls echoing somewhere far away. The fabricated image they had created of poor, pitiful Emily. I had been quietly preparing to shatter that illusion for years. I did not change my expression in response to their mockery or their condescension. I felt neither anger nor sadness, There was only one thing left to do, and that was to carry out what needed to be done. I turned my back on my family and began walking straight toward the roaring bulldozer. The gravel crunched loudly beneath the soles of my leather shoes. The first person to react to my unexpected approach was Olivia. "Hey, where do you think you're going? Are you trying to interfere?" Her hysterical voice chased after me from behind. "What are you doing? Investors are coming to tour the site today. Stop embarrassing us." Without turning around, I headed straight for a man wearing a helmet who appeared to be the person in charge of the construction site. He had been barking orders at the workers, but when he noticed me walking directly toward him, a puzzled expression crossed his face. Olivia's shrill screams grew even louder. "Don't stop the construction! Please! My wedding depends on this!" Her desperate cries only served to draw the attention of the workers on site. Several of them stopped what they were doing and watched from a distance as I stood there, with my shouting family behind me. I came to a stop in front of the site supervisor and quietly looked up at him. Then I reached for the large leather bag slung over my shoulder and slowly pulled out a thick file from inside. The file was heavy, and it felt as though the weight of years of preparation was being transmitted directly into my hands. At that moment, the deafening noise of the heavy machinery dominating the site seemed to fade just a little. My calm demeanor and the conspicuously out-of-place file began to bring an unsettling and strange silence over the scene. It was the first moment a small crack appeared in the celebratory mood, so full of confidence that my family had been enjoying. "Excuse me, are you the site supervisor here?" I asked the man in front of me in a composed tone. He nodded, looking slightly confused. "Yes, I am. Is there some kind of problem?" "Whether there is a problem or not, I think you should decide that after you see this." With that, I opened the file I was holding and handed him the document that lay on top. It was the original copy of a land title deed, officially notarized at a public notary's office. The document clearly stated, in unmistakable printed text, that the owner of this land, Coastal Highway 847, was Emily Carter. The supervisor accepted the document with a dubious look and ran a professional, scrutinizing gaze over the registration number and the dates printed on it. Seeing this, my father rushed forward in a panic. What is that document supposed to be? What possible meaning could something like that have? This land belongs to the Bennett family. I turned toward my father and, for the first time, spoke clearly. "No, that's not true. This land was legally inherited by me from Grandpa on March 15th, 5 years ago, through proper and official legal procedures." I stated the facts, calmly and without emotion. "In the presence of the attorney listed here, Andrew Collins, Grandpa transferred all rights to me of his own free will, and of course, all records of that process are fully documented right here." As I said this, I lightly tapped the stack of files. Olivia shouted in disbelief, "That's a lie! Those documents have to be forged. There's no way Grandpa would ever give the land to someone like you." Her words no longer sounded like certainty, but rather like a weak, desperate cry, trying to desperately hold together a reality that was already beginning to collapse. The site supervisor compared the title deed in his hands with the name Bennett written on the sign in front of him and frowned deeply. His professional experience was telling him that this was not a simple family dispute, but a far more serious legal problem. The supervisor lifted his eyes from the deed and addressed my father. "Mr. Bennett, what exactly is going on here? The ownership doesn't match, and that means—" My father's face flushed red as he shouted back, "This is some kind of mistake. That woman there has done nothing more than fabricate some ridiculous paperwork." But there was not even a trace of the absolute confidence he had shown earlier in his voice. I glanced briefly at my shaken family and then reached for the file once more. This time, I pulled out an even thicker bundle of documents that had been tucked into the next section. I'm sorry, but the real problem isn't just the ownership. I removed a single sheet from the top of the bundle and thrust it directly in front of him. It was an official notice. "What is this?" my father asked in a hoarse voice. So that everyone present could hear, I spoke clearly and firmly. "It seems none of you knew what designation this land received 2 years ago during the summer." I paused for a breath, then delivered the decisive fact. This land has been designated as a buffer zone for the adjacent Emerald Coast State Nature Reserve, and it is now under special environmental protection. This was an official decision passed by the state legislature. They did not seem to understand the meaning of those words right away. All that filled the air was a heavy sense that something far worse was about to happen. Tracing a line of text on the notice with my finger, I read it aloud. "Any and all forms of commercial development, large-scale land alteration, and the construction of new structures within the designated area are hereby completely prohibited by law." Completely prohibited! Those words echoed through the suddenly silent site like a final verdict. I could almost see their dream of the harborside resort, a castle built on sand, collapsing with a crash against the massive wall of the law. Prohibited? That can't be. Olivia repeated the word like a parrot, her voice hollow and unsteady. The color drained from her face and her eyes wandered aimlessly, as if they could no longer focus on anything in front of her. What's going to happen to the resort plan? And my wedding? I already prepared everything. That scream was no longer just a cry of protest, but something closer to a shriek. My father stood there in stunned silence, as if he had been struck, while my mother covered her mouth with both hands and trembled faintly. The grand plan they had spent years carefully crafting and passionately pitching to investors had been denied its very existence by a single sheet of paper. My father spoke in a strained, rasping voice. Why didn't we know about this notice? It's impossible that we, the owners, were never informed." Hearing those words, I allowed myself for the first time a faint smile. Yes, of course there was a notice. 2 years ago, it was sent to me, the rightful owner. Slowly I pointed to my own chest. To me, the very person you looked down on as a pitiful part-timer. Then, I fixed my gaze directly on them, ready to reveal the final truth. The time had come to show who I really was, the self I had kept hidden until now. Let me correct one thing. I am not a part-time environmental researcher. I took another item from my bag, an ID card holder, and placed it around my neck. On it, alongside the state emblem, my name and title were clearly printed. My real job is senior investigator with the State Environmental Protection Agency, and as a matter of fact, I am the field supervisor in charge of the ecosystem conservation project for the entire Emerald Coast region. In that instant, all expression vanished from Olivia's face, and my parents stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost. They were finally beginning to grasp the bitter irony that the very job they had once called a disgrace to the family was the most powerful weapon that had shattered their ambitions. It was at the exact moment I revealed my true identity. As if timed perfectly, a single vehicle could be seen quietly approaching from the private road. It was not a familiar passenger car. The official logo of the State Environmental Protection Agency was clearly painted on the side of the vehicle. Everyone at the site held their breath at the sight of the government car. The vehicle stopped right beside the bulldozer, and 2 officials, a man and a woman dressed in crisp uniforms, stepped out. After briefly surveying the situation, they walked straight toward me without hesitation. One of them, a man named Lucas, my colleague and also a close friend, gave me a small nod. In his eyes was a clear signal that said, "Everything is going according to plan." "Emily, we received your call and came immediately. We've already been briefed on the situation." After saying that to me, Lucas turned to face my stunned family and the visibly confused site supervisor. His expression shifted from the gentle one he had shown me to the stern look of someone carrying out official public duties. He operated the tablet device in his hand and, while showing the screen to the site supervisor, began to speak in a calm yet formal tone. "You are the person in charge here, correct? The construction work you are currently carrying out constitutes an extremely serious violation of state law, specifically the Protected Area Act." "A violation?" the site supervisor asked, back in a hoarse voice. The female official standing beside Lucas, Natalie, continued while citing specific legal provisions. "Yes, unauthorized demolition work on this land is strictly prohibited by law. In particular, large-scale land alteration using heavy machinery poses a risk of causing irreversible damage to the surrounding ecosystem, which is why we regard this situation as extremely serious." A representative of a public authority was calmly laying out legal terminology one after another. The scene was brutally distant from the glamorous resort plan the family had envisioned, replacing it with a cold and uncompromising reality. Their dream stage had now completely transformed into the scene of a legal violation, a crime under the law. Lucas swiped the tablet screen and displayed another document. It was a digital copy of a demolition permit application submitted to the county building permit office under my father, Michael Bennett's name. He held the document up directly in front of my father. "Mr. Bennett, there are several serious issues with this application that you submitted." My father could not say a word and simply swallowed hard. Lucas tapped a specific section of the application with his finger and zoomed in on it. "First, the landowner section. You have listed yourself as the owner, which directly contradicts the title deed presented by investigator Emily Carter. This constitutes a clear, false declaration." Lucas continued without pause. "And more importantly, this is the most serious issue. You submitted this application while completely ignoring the fact that this land is subject to special environmental protection designation. Our investigation shows that you explicitly stated to the county that no legal restrictions of any kind apply to this land, didn't you?" That accusation was not pointing to a simple mistake, but to deliberate and intentional wrongdoing, Natalie added in an icy voice. "Attempting to obtain official permission through false declarations may constitute fraud. In addition, violations of the Protected Area Act can result not only in substantial fines, but also, in some cases, criminal penalties, including imprisonment. Please be fully aware of that." "Criminal penalties." My mother repeated the words weakly, nearly collapsing on the spot, as Olivia rushed to support her. At that moment, I finally broke my silence and posed the decisive question. "By the way, Dad, what do you plan to do about the $500,000 you claim to have collected from multiple investors for the Harborside Resort project?" Those words became the final blow for them. Not only legal consequences, but now the reality of financial collapse had been thrust directly in front of them. How were they going to explain to the investors that the resort project had become legally impossible? And when they realized they had been deceived, what would happen then? The color had completely drained from my family's faces, leaving nothing but fear and despair. The weight of the words "criminal penalties" spoken by the Environmental Protection Agency officials, froze the air at the site completely. The site supervisor must have judged that staying involved any longer was dangerous. He immediately shouted orders to his subordinates in a loud voice. "Everyone, stop all work. Shut down the engines. Start preparing to withdraw from the site immediately." At that command, the bulldozer engines that had been roaring moments before fell silent, and an eerie stillness descended over the site. Although the workers did not fully understand what had happened, they sensed that this was no ordinary situation from their supervisor's tense demeanor, and they hurriedly climbed down from the heavy machinery and began packing up. The massive yellow machines that had symbolized their dream of resort construction were now nothing more than giant lumps of cold steel. At the sight of it all, the tightly stretched thread holding Olivia together finally snapped. No, I can't. This can't be happening." She collapsed weakly onto the ground and began to sob like a child. A lavish wedding, wealthy guests, fireworks. The brilliant future she had imagined crumbled before her eyes with an audible crash. Her sobbing reached no one's heart. My father stood pale as a ghost, staring blankly into empty space, perhaps imagining the explanations he would have to give the investors and the storm of lawsuits that was surely about to begin. My mother was completely flustered and could not even bring herself to comfort her daughter. It was at that very moment that Olivia's earlier words, "The investors are coming," became reality in the worst possible way. From beyond the gravel road, a black luxury sedan glided into view and came to a stop just beside us. Stepping out of the back seat was a dignified man in his 60s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. When my father saw the man's face, his complexion grew even worse. "Mr. Parker." William Parker, a powerful figure who had made a name for himself in real estate investment throughout the region and the largest investor in this resort project. Mr. Parker looked around suspiciously at the heavy machinery being withdrawn, the collapsed and sobbing Olivia, and the uniformed Environmental Protection Agency officials. "Michael, what exactly is going on here? I heard the groundbreaking ceremony for a magnificent resort was beginning, so I came to offer my congratulations." Despite his calm tone, his eyes were sharp, methodically analyzing the situation. My father desperately tried to maintain his composure, forcing a strained smile as he stepped toward Mr. Parker. "Mr. Parker, thank you so much for coming all this way. Well, there's just, a small procedural issue that's come up. It will be resolved shortly, so there's no need to worry." That utterly hollow lie was obvious to anyone. Mr. Parker's gaze shifted to the ID card hanging around my neck. "Who are you?" In response to his question, I stepped forward and answered clearly. "Mr. William Parker, I presume? My name is Emily Carter, Senior Investigator with the State Environmental Protection Agency." Then, not just for him to hear, but to seal the despair of everyone present, I continued. "And I am also the legal owner of the land you have invested in." William Parker's eyebrow twitched slightly. He looked back and forth between my father's face and mine and seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation instantly. My father panicked and tried to grab my arm. "Emily, stop this! This is a family matter! Don't drag outsiders into it!" I shook his hand off and calmly continued, "Mr. Parker, you have most likely not been informed of a critical fact. This land does not belong to Michael Bennett. And more importantly, I took a copy of the state government's official notice from my file and handed it to him. This land is a state-designated nature conservation area where all commercial development is permanently prohibited by law." William Parker read through the document and his expression grew steadily more severe. There was no way he could fail to understand the meaning of the legally binding language written there. My father could no longer find any words to defend himself and could only repeat, "That's not true. There's been a misunderstanding." My colleague Lucas stepped forward beside William Parker and delivered the decisive statement. "Mr. Parker, everything she has said is true. We, the State Environmental Protection Agency, can formally verify it. In fact, the development permit application submitted to the county by Michael Bennett constitutes a malicious false declaration that deliberately concealed these facts." That official confirmation signaled the end of everything. The calm mask of a businessman fell away from William Parker's face, and pure anger burst forth. He advanced on my father as if he were about to grab him by the collar. "Michael, were you planning to drag me into a fraud scheme?" His furious shout echoed across the site. "You intended to break the law with my money and make me an accomplice to a crime. What happened to your pride as a businessman?" My father could not answer and did nothing but tremble. William Parker pulled a smartphone from his pocket and began making a call. "Hello, it's me. Assemble the legal team immediately. We're filing a lawsuit against Michael Bennett for fraud and breach of contract. I'll personally contact the other investors as well. I won't let him get away with a single cent." After ending the call, he glared at my family as if they were nothing but trash. Then, finally, he turned toward me and, surprisingly, addressed me politely. "Investigator Carter, thank you for telling me the truth. I was dangerously close to becoming a criminal myself." With those words, he turned on his heel, got into the black sedan, and left quietly, just as he had arrived. After that car disappeared from view, not even a fragment of hope remained. Socially and economically, their ruin was sealed at that very moment. The glory of the Bennett family they had tried to build was transformed in the span of just a few hours into inescapable despair in the form of legal responsibility and financial collapse. Only the quiet house that had been waiting to be demolished and the rich natural surroundings embracing it stood there as if nothing had happened, gently brushed by the calm sea breeze. On the very ground where their ambitions were crushed, a quiet victory was confirmed, one that brought no joy at all. I stood there silently, watching the workers hurriedly withdraw from the site. Lucas came to my side and asked in a low voice, "Are you okay?" I nodded without saying a word. Some might wonder, seeing all this, why I did not tell my family the truth sooner, but there was a clear reason why I could not. I vividly remember what happened 7 years ago when I graduated from college and secured a position with the Environmental Protection Agency. At a family dinner, I spoke with shining eyes about my dreams and the importance of my work. I talked about protecting rare plants and animals, and about the responsibility of preserving this beautiful natural world for future generations. But my father's reaction was cold. He set down his wine glass and looked at me with unmistakable disappointment. "Emily, how long are you going to keep talking about childish dreams? What good is a job that doesn't make money? You are a disgrace to the Bennett family." Those words cut deeply into my heart. In that moment, I realized that for them, value was something measured only in money. From that day on, I stopped telling my family anything truthful about my work. I deliberately allowed the label they created, the pitiful part-time daughter, to remain attached to me. That label became my own form of armor, protecting the world that mattered most to me. And then there was my grandfather's wish, the land he entrusted to me. Shortly before he passed away, he took my hand in his hospital room and said this, "Emily, that land is not a tool for making money. It is a true treasure where for generations Birds have rested their wings as they crossed the sea, and small creatures have carried on their lives. You are the only one who understands its value. That is why I entrust it to you. Promise me that you will protect it." Holding back my tears, I nodded firmly. What I did today was not revenge. I simply devoted everything I had to keeping a precious promise I made to my grandfather. That is all it was. The final truck loaded with heavy machinery rolled slowly down the gravel road. My colleagues from the Environmental Protection Agency completed the necessary procedures, patted my shoulder with a quiet, "We'll take it from here," and then left. In front of the house that had been so noisy just moments ago, only I and my 3 shattered family members remained. A deep silence settled over the place, as if after a storm had finally passed. Only the sound of the waves and the cries of seagulls seemed unnaturally loud. My father finally lifted his head, as if coming back to his senses, and for the first time looked straight at me. But there was no anger or hatred in his eyes, only a deep confusion, as though he were staring at something he could not comprehend. Without saying a word, he took hold of Olivia's arm as she cried uncontrollably, supported my mother by the shoulder, and slowly began walking toward their car. His back looked nothing like the confident, imposing figure of my father that I had always known. It looked small and painfully aged. After they left, I stood alone in front of my grandfather's house. Before me was the untouched house, filled with memories. Beyond it stretched the endless blue ocean. I took a deep breath. The air carried the scent of salt and damp earth. This was what I had wanted to protect. My actions were not meant to destroy them, and yet that was how things turned out. There was no joy in my heart, only a quiet, steady sense of fulfillment. Knowing that I had protected what truly needed to be protected filled my chest. My promise to my grandfather, the small lives that breathed within this land, and my own struggle to ensure that I would never be consumed by a way of life that pursued only monetary value. All of it found a single answer today. 6 months passed after that storm-like day. At the entrance to the road leading to my grandfather's house, a solid wooden sign installed by the state government now stands. Emerald Coast, State Nature Reserve, Special Buffer Zone. Those words quietly declare that this land is firmly protected by law. Around the house that had nearly been torn down, the trees I planted to attract wild birds have gradually taken root, and in the spring, a rare pair of migratory birds came here to build their nest. Peaceful days have returned. On the other hand, peace never came to my family. I heard through others that my parents were spending their days dealing with a collective lawsuit filed by the people who had invested in the resort plan. The fortune and social trust they had built over many years were almost entirely lost, and bankruptcy seems only a matter of time. My sister Olivia had her engagement broken off as a direct result of that incident. The lavish wedding she dreamed of and her future as part of the wealthy elite all vanished like an illusion. Since then, my family has never contacted me, even once, and our ties have been completely severed. I still live in the house my grandfather left behind, continuing my work as a senior investigator with the Environmental Protection Agency. Every time I look out at the calm sea beyond my window, I remember my grandfather's words. That true wealth is not measured by money or status, but by whether you possess something truly worth protecting. Here, I have what I wanted to protect and what I succeeded in protecting. From now on, I will live quietly in this place, alongside the nature my grandfather loved. My true work begins again from here.